Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. Today's story is one you won't forget anytime soon, because it proves that you never really know who someone is just by looking at them. And sometimes the quietest person in the room carries the biggest past. It was just another early morning in the downtown corporate tower, the kind of place where the marble floors always shined. The glass walls reflected power and money, and the people who walked through the lobby rarely looked at anyone who wasn't dressed like them. Suits moved fast, heels clicked with confidence, phones rang non-stop. And right in the middle of all that stood a man no one ever noticed. His name was Daniel Carter. Daniel was a single dad and the night shift janitor. Every evening after putting his 8-year-old daughter Lily to bed, Daniel pulled on his faded blue uniform, packed a simple lunch, and headed to work. Lily thought her dad was the strongest man in the world, not because he lifted heavy things, but because he never missed a school play, never forgot a bedtime story, and always smiled even when life was clearly exhausting him. At the office tower, Daniel kept his head down. He cleaned floors, emptied trash, wiped fingerprints off glass doors, and pushed his mop cart from one silent hallway to another. Most employees barely acknowledged him. A few didn't even hide their disrespect. Some talked loudly about deals and bonuses right in front of him, as if he were invisible. Others left messes on purpose, assuming that's what janitors are for. Daniel never complained, not because he was weak, but because he had learned long ago that silence could be a form of control. What no one in that building knew was that Daniel's calm, steady walk came from years of discipline. His quiet eyes weren't empty, they were watchful. His strong hands weren't just used to gripping a mop handle. Once, long ago, they had held something very different. That night started like any other, until it didn't. Around 11:30 p.m., most of the offices were dark. Only a few lights glowed on the executive floors. Daniel was finishing up near the underground parking level where the air smelled of oil and concrete. He hummed softly to himself, thinking about Lily's math test the next day and whether he had enough money left this week to buy her the art supplies she wanted. Then he heard laughter. Not the friendly kind, the sharp, mean kind. 4 men stepped out from behind a parked SUV. They looked drunk, aggressive, and bored. One of them kicked over a trash bin just to hear it crash. Another noticed Daniel and smirked. "Well, look at this," one of the men said. "The cleaning crew's still working. Hey mop guy, you missed a spot over there." They laughed. Daniel stopped pushing his cart but didn't respond. He had learned that engagement often made things worse. One of the men walked closer, invading Daniel's space. "You deaf or just stupid?" Daniel slowly looked up, his expression neutral. "I'm just here to do my job," he said calmly. That should have been the end of it. But some people don't stop when they should. The man shoved Daniel's cart, sending the mop clattering to the floor. "Your job is whatever we say it is." For a split second, the parking garage was silent. Something changed in Daniel's eyes. It was subtle. If you didn't know what to look for, you'd miss it. His shoulders relaxed instead of tensing. His breathing slowed. The tired janitor disappeared, and something older, sharper, stepped forward. Daniel raised his hands slightly, palms open. "Let's not make this a problem," he said. That's when one of the men swung. Everything that happened next took less than 10 seconds. Daniel moved with precision that didn't match his uniform or his role. He stepped inside the punch, grabbed the man's wrist, twisted, and used the momentum to slam him into the concrete. Before the second man could react, Daniel snatched the fallen mop, spinning it with practiced ease. The wooden handle cracked against a knee, dropping one attacker instantly. The third man charged, shouting, but Daniel swept his legs out with the mop and followed with a controlled strike that knocked the wind out of him. The fourth man froze, staring in disbelief at the 3 groaning bodies on the ground. Daniel pointed the mop at him, his voice low and steady. "Go, now." The man didn't hesitate. He ran. The garage fell quiet again, broken only by distant traffic sounds and the echo of footsteps disappearing up the ramp. Daniel stood there for a moment, heart steady, hands firm. Then he exhaled, leaned the mop back against the cart, and straightened his uniform like nothing had happened. He checked the men on the ground just long enough to make sure they were alive, then called security anonymously and continued his shift. He thought that would be the end of it. He was wrong. Security footage doesn't forget. The next morning, the building's CEO, a woman named Evelyn Ross, sat in her office reviewing overnight incident reports. Evelyn was known as sharp, demanding, and almost impossible to impress. She had built the company from the ground up and trusted data more than people. When the head of security mentioned an altercation in the parking garage, Evelyn barely looked up. "Did anyone get hurt?" "Some bruises," he said, "but you should see the footage." Curious, despite herself, Evelyn watched the screen. At first, she saw 4 men cornering a janitor. She frowned, annoyed at the liability. Then the janitor moved. Evelyn leaned forward. She watched again, and again, her face drained of color. "That's impossible," she whispered. She paused the video on danielsface.com and focused in the middle of the chaos. Her heart started pounding, not with fear, but recognition. She knew that stance. She knew that movement. Years ago, long before she was a CEO, Evelyn had worked in government operations. She had seen elite professionals train for situations most people never even imagined. And only one group moved exactly like that. She said his name quietly, like she was afraid to be wrong. Daniel Carter. Evelyn ordered HR to bring Daniel to her office immediately. When Daniel was told the CEO wanted to see him, his first thought was Lily. His second was his job. He washed his hands, straightened his shirt, and took the elevator up to the top floor, surrounded by luxury he had never once enjoyed. He stepped into Evelyn's office and stood respectfully near the door. "You wanted to see me, ma'am?" Evelyn studied him closely. Without the mop, without the cart, he still carried himself differently than other employees. Strong, controlled. "Where did you learn to fight like that?" she asked bluntly. Daniel hesitated. He hadn't spoken about his past in years. "That part of my life is over," he said carefully. Evelyn stood up. "Not until you tell me the truth." She walked to her desk, pulled out an old file, and slid it across to him. On the cover was a faded photo of a younger man in uniform. Daniel stared. It was him. "You were part of a classified unit," Evelyn said. "One of the best. You disappeared after the operation went wrong." Daniel's jaw tightened. "I didn't disappear. I walked away," she asked. Daniel took a breath. "Because my wife was killed while I was deployed. Because my daughter needed a father more than the world needed another soldier. Because I was tired of violence." The room was silent. Evelyn softened. "You could have had anything. Security consultant, trainer, executive protection. Why become a janitor?" Daniel met her eyes. "Because it's honest work, and it lets me be home when my daughter wakes up." Evelyn felt something unfamiliar in her chest. Respect. She leaned back in her chair. "Do you know how many people walk past you every day without seeing you?" Daniel gave a small smile. "I'm used to it." Evelyn shook her head. "That changes today." She offered him a new position on the spot. Head of Internal Security. Triple his current salary. Flexible hours. Daniel thought of Lily, of art supplies, of never having to count pennies again. "I'll accept," he said, "on one condition." Evelyn raised an eyebrow. "My daughter always comes first." She smiled. Deal. Weeks later, the building felt different. Employees noticed the quiet man who now wore a badge instead of pushing a mop. Whispers spread when people realized who he was. Some felt embarrassed. Others felt safer. As for the 4 men in the garage, charges were dropped after footage showed clear self. At home, Lily hugged her dad when he told her about the new job. "I knew you were a hero," she said. Daniel laughed softly and kissed her forehead. "I'm just your dad. And sometimes, that's the greatest role of all." If this story reminded you not to judge people by appearances, make sure to like, subscribe, and share it with someone who needs to hear it today.